From CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. There was a powerful hearing in Tallahassee earlier this week dealing with mental illness in the criminal justice system. We will get into it in a few minutes. But first, I want to start with my interview Friday with Democratic Congressman Jared Moskowitz. We covered a lot, but wanted to begin with the president's address to Congress on Tuesday and why he voted to censure fellow Democrat Al Green for repeatedly interrupting the president's speech.
Yeah, I mean, look, the president's address was ridiculous. It wasn't an address. It was a campaign rally. It was not laying out his plan. It was relitigating, past grievances. But that was, to be expected, obviously. We knew he would come try to troll us, hence the "I'm the greatest president since George Washington." And so, look, the party knew we were going to have to deal with the things that came out of his mouth that were, going to be false, like, these old people, 200 or 300 years old getting Social Security checks. They may have been in the computer, but nobody was getting a check. And, that we sent $350 billion to Ukraine. That's not accurate. And so we knew we were going to have to deal with that. Leadership, wanted it to be a unified way. They did not want individual members doing their own thing. And Democrats obviously have to figure out how we do that. How do we make sure that we're protecting Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, which is what Al Green was standing up to do, which is what I agree with. How do we do that in a way where we can get our message out, where the method of how we do it doesn't step on the message? As far as the censure is concerned, I mean, ultimately, look, Al Green voted president on his own vote. He didn't vote no on his censure because Al Green said, "I knew what I was doing. I did it with intentionality. I knew what the consequences were going to be." And so, had I been there when Marjorie Taylor Greene did that, I would have censured her. And if another member did that there has to be some sort of decorum in the body. That being said, with what Trump is doing to government, these illegal cuts, a lot of these firings, which are being reversed by courts, going after NOAA, FEMA, things that are important to Florida. I mean, I get that now's not the time for decorum, perhaps. And so, look, that'll be a pivot as we move forward.
So that really does raise the larger question of how should Democrats respond? It's always the issue that when a party loses the presidency, that there is a tendency not to have someone designated as the leader of the party. Democrats right now really don't have a leader in the party that's sort of calling the shots. You have a lot of different people who are expressing their views. So going forward, how do you think Democrats should confront the issues that Donald Trump raises, the threats that they believe he poses to the country? What's the best strategy there?
Well, it's all about messaging. I mean, that's really all we have as a congressman in the minority and in a Congress that's been weakened over decades, where more power has been reserved into the executive branch. Congress is not passing many bills. So really, it's our messaging. It's going to the camera. It's going to podcasts. It's going online. It's doing it in committees, which I have done over the last 2.5 years. It's getting our message out. And so, right now that's what we're trying to figure out, which is what's the best way to do that.
And what is that message, though? Let me jump in.
It's very simple. Hold on. The message is very simple. We're not cutting Social Security. We're not cutting Medicare. We're not cutting Medicaid. Those are benefits that were promised to people. That's not how we're going to balance the budget off of working class. We're going to fight for our veterans. They're trying to fire these veterans. Okay, we're going to fight for our veterans. The economy. Donald Trump said he'd fix the economy on day one. Donald Trump has only made the economy worse since he's been president. The stock market is lower. Why does the stock market matter? Because that's where people's pensions, 401ks, their life savings are in the funds. They said they'd fix the price of eggs on day one. Price of eggs now is higher now than when Donald Trump took office. Those are the things Democrats, in my opinion, should be talking about. And we should be direct and we should be fierce and we should absolutely fight. But we're going to have to also how to figure out, what works in some districts also doesn't work in others. So there is going to be different strategies at times.
You're in one of those districts that Republicans are clearly going to target. I think that the target-rich environment on congressional landscape favors Democrats going into 2026. Yours is going to be one of those districts, though, that Republicans are going to fight to try to claw back. How does that weigh into your thinking as you move forward in what you do?
Well, look, my number one goal right now, in addition to fighting the administration, is to make Hakeem Jeffries Speaker. That's the number one goal. If you're a Democrat in the House, 2026 can't get here fast enough. And we got to get a chamber back. Have to get a chamber back. And so while we're fighting Donald Trump, trying to preserve as much as we can in the meantime, we got to get to a point where we make Hakeem Speaker. So, we're going to have to win districts where Donald Trump won, and we have Democratic members who serve in those districts. And we're going to have to win districts like mine where Donald Trump barely lost. He only lost my district by 1.5 points. My district is getting redder because of the migration in Florida. And who knows if the legislature is going to redistrict our seats. Governor Ron DeSantis has potentially talked about that because of the court cases. And so this is the calculus that many members make. But there are also lines at the end of the day. And let me give you an example. There's now rumors that they're going to try to go kick Al Green off a committee. I can assure you that if that's what Republicans are going to do, they're going to get punitive and they're going to continue to break that place, then Democrats are going to match that, okay? We will match that. If they start kicking Democratic members off committees, not only will I vote against that, not only will I go to the well, but we will look those House Freedom Caucus members in the face and say, when we get power, when Hakeem Jeffries is Speaker, your weeks in D.C. are going to be a lot less. You're going to get to spend a lot of time with your family because not a single one of you is going to be appointed to a committee.
You talk about the role that Congress plays and the expanded executive. We've seen this over time, but never to the extent that we've now seen it with Donald Trump. And I'm amazed at how your Republican colleagues seem to be okay with Donald Trump's position, which is, yes, Congress has the power of the purse strings, but as the chief executive, I can ignore what Congress passes. I can ignore the law that Congress decrees in terms of how funding and spending should go. What is the danger in that?
Well, with all due respect to my Republican colleagues, they're willing to do whatever Donald Trump tells them to do. They don't have, there's no individuality right now in the House. The only one so far that has stood up to the president is Thomas Massie, who voted against the budget because it's going to add trillions of dollars to the debt, something the president says he doesn't want to do, and Elon Musk says he doesn't want to do, and Doge says they don't want to do. They're doing it. They're adding trillions of dollars to the debt with their budget plans. And so there's no individuality. In fact, we're going to see that next week on the CR vote. I'm not voting for the CR. I'm a no vote on the CR because the American people don't want the status quo. That's a status quo vote. Also, they want to trap Democrats to be like, oh, look, this fraud, waste, and abuse we say we found, you voted to refund it. I'm not falling into that trap. I'm a no vote on the CR. They say they have a mandate. They're going to have to figure that out on their own.
So let me just hold you there for a second, because I don't want to get into too much Washington speak. But when you say you're a no vote on the CR, what you're saying is that you are willing to have the government shut down. If that Democrats always in the past have been the folks who came along and rescued, the votes that was necessary to keep the government open. If it comes to that, you're willing to, and do you think a lot of Democrats are now willing to say, fine, if this is what the Republicans are doing, then maybe we should shut the government down?
No, I don't want to shut the government down, but I'm also not going to vote for something that is a mistake. The speaker said he was going to bring individual spending bills. They did 7 of them and then they stopped. That was a promise he made to his own caucus. We need to fund the government by individual spending bills. We've heard from Republicans for the longest time that these continuing resolutions, which, are using old budgets, this is the COVID level spending. They've bastardized it. They've called it all sorts of names, but now because Donald Trump says he wants it, they're going to vote for it, back to the fact that they do whatever he says. So I'm not going to vote for that. If they put an individual spending bill on the floor, then yes, I will vote for it. Or if they put a document on the floor that addresses the needs of both Democrats and Republicans, then I would vote for it. But I'm not voting for a clean CR under any circumstance. They have the votes. Remember, they're in charge of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. It's their government, okay? They're in charge. They should go get the votes. to do it on their own.
I want to just change gears for a second and talk a little bit about, well, let's start with tariffs, because, you know, one of the, again, is we're doing this interview Friday morning. The tariff policy of the president has changed 3 times this week. So I don't know what it'll be like between now and Sunday. But
it's changing. It's changing while you're talking right now.
How disconcerting is that, and how big a problem is that we don't seem to know what the tariff policy of the United States is going to be, and that level of uncertainty? What does uncertainty do, not just to markets, but to the economy overall?
Well, it's pure chaos. And the market hates chaos. The market wants some level of certainty. The tariffs are on one day, they're off. Like, if you ask me right now what tariffs are on or off, I couldn't even tell you. I can't even keep up. And look, part of that strategy of flooding the zone and keeping us distracted, which is, you know, their strategy, the markets don't like that.
You were the former head of emergency management here at the state of Florida. You understand the importance of an agency like FEMA. You know, there seems to be efforts to either weaken or undermine FEMA. Same thing with regard to, we're seeing the budget cuts as it relates to, you know, the National Hurricane Center. What is the impact of this, and what is your message on both those agencies going forward?
Well, first on NOAA, what they're doing at NOAA literally is chapter and verse right out of Project 2025. It just is, of what they're trying to do there, because they're trying to privatize NOAA. They want to give that to a private company. That's been the plan all along. And, you know, at the end of the day, Americans have to be able to get their weather from a public institution, not from a private company that controls all that information on, you know, how we're going to be able to travel in this country and what the weather is for the day and where hurricanes are going. And so we have to fight against that. Look, on FEMA, I do think there are reforms that can be made, and I'm trying to save FEMA. I'm doing everything I can to save FEMA as the institution that we know it. And I've been fighting the administration on some of the people they've let go there, but also trying to figure out how we can come up with ideas on a bipartisan basis to reform it. Red states will be dramatically affected without FEMA. Rural areas, poor areas won't be rebuilt. Towns will be gone if FEMA does not reimburse those places. We saw that in Hurricane Michael. At the end of the day, these towns that had a $5 million budget, but $30 million worth of costs to recover would not recover without it. And so if that happens and that burden goes to the states will have to raise taxes. They'll have to raid their education funds, their DOT funds. It will be a total disaster. Democrats and Republicans in Congress know this. But I do think we can talk about block grants. I do think we can do a little less in Washington and do a little more in the states. We can send that money faster down to the states and do block grants, so the states are the ones running the grant rather than running it in Washington, D.C. And I also think we got to get FEMA out of Homeland. We need FEMA to be faster. Homeland is slowing it down. It's a giant bureaucracy of 22 or 23 agencies, and they have FEMA doing all of the grants for all of those agencies. I want to get FEMA out of Homeland, which is how it was when it was originally created, and that will make FEMA faster.
When we come back, the Tristan Murphy Act had its first hearing in the Florida Senate. We'll have the emotional testimony that left many in tears. Stay with us.